Welcome back to Rubbin Minds. Before the break, we looked at some of the past week's headlines and we discussed that. But now we're moving on to something that's very passionate, very important to a lot of Nigerians, that elicits a lot of emotions. And I'm talking about faith. Faith is the trust, the confidence, the belief in a person or an idea or a spiritual entity or even the government. To discuss with me, I have a man of faith. He's a chaplain, Mark Olubena. Mark, welcome to the show.
Well, it's a pleasure being with you.
So faith is something that every Nigerian can relate to when it comes to either religion or when it comes to faith in the government. Like there's that mantra of change. But how far do you go in faith when the people or the person you have faith in begin to let you down?
Well, we must also take into consideration everything we want to discuss or want to go into. We must also look back into the origin. I often say to people, if you want to be original, you must go back to the origin. The origin of faith has to do with a divine entity. It has to do with God. It has to do with a spiritual being. Of course, to diversify into human being having faith in each other and then having to be disappointed and having one problem or the other with, having to have your confidence in somebody or rendering your loyalty to somebody and the person comes up to disappoint you. Well, you need to look at it and say, what is the basis of your faith or what's your connection and your relationship with this person before you can say you were disappointed. What was the agreement? Because faith has to do with agreement between two persons. So you need to know that when you having faith in somebody, there must be a connection. There must be a connection between you and that person. But when talking about God, talking about the spiritual entity, humanity has to be in partnership with divinity for common productivity. It's very important for you to know that God and man has to relate, and we must believe in him, even though we can't see him, but we believe he created the world, he created the universe. And then when it comes to somebody you can see, there must be a standing agreement between you and the person. So when the disappointment comes up with this person, then you need to revisit the standard and the agreement you had with the person before you start having disappointment.
Okay, so you said faith has to do with a belief. It's contractual. But then faith, when you mentioned with God, you don't see God, but in a human being, you see the human being. So whatever you're putting your faith in to a degree is a sort of hope because nothing is assured. So if nothing is assured by you putting in faith, how then can you hold that person accountable?
Well, faith in a person, as you rightly said, believing in a person that, of course, you have this, believe that this person is going to do this to you or do this for you. That's why I'm doing this for this person. And then you both has reached, there must be an agreement. Faith. Take, for example, let's take for the spiritual. Jesus Christ of Nazareth, or you're a Muslim, you have faith in God, and you know all his promises. He has some laid down promises from the Holy Book. And then they say, this is what you're going to have when you have this. This is what you're going to get when you have. So you have that word. You can hold him when you begin to see some flaws. Now, if you have, connection with any human being, before you have faith in the person, there must be a relationship. There must be a frequency. Maybe love, maybe commitment, maybe family bond. Now, when you have those things, when there's disappointment left and right, you need to now revisit the agreement you had. There's no faith without an agreement. You give your life to God because you know God can do this or that for you. And so you know he has some promises laid down that if you diligently obey my word, I will do this to you. So you have right to go back to him and say, God, I'm saying this, I'm saying that. What's happening? You have to communicate.
Okay.
Faith has to do with relationship.
So when it comes to faith in God through man, so such religious leaders, sometimes people go very far based on what the religious leader says. So a religious leader can say, go and drink something, or go and eat grass, or go and act in a certain manner. And that might not be written in the religious book. But because there's a faith in that God through that person, these people do it. Or when it even comes to giving of money, of giving of alms, how far are people going in practicing their faith without getting some kind of backing from that religious book or getting some kind of agreement, in your own words?
The main problem we have in our generation is that we lack information. And when you don't have information, there will be deformation. We don't have direct information that we need to work with. Sometimes when you get to a religious place and you don't know what that place is all about, you get into trouble. You need to go back to the scripture, that book that they practice, and then read When you are brought into a church or brought into a church or brought into a mosque, you need to sit down, begin to look at it. What is it that this book is saying? You know, you need to study to show yourself approved. When you study, when anybody says something contrary, there is a supreme authority over that religious leader. And so you must also know that there's hierarchy of authority, and you must not disappoint the higher one. So when a leader is telling you things that is contrary to what the stipulated rule in that holy book, you begin to question. You have right to ask questions. You have right to say no. Having faith in that person does not blindfold you or cover your eyes from saying the truth. There are some laws, there are some things they ask you to do that you really need to look straight into and then search and research into those informations available with that religious belief before you go into them. And sometimes it's not ordinary. It's, you know, has to do with hypnotizing people. It has to do with some sort of spiritual power, manipulating them to do some funny things.
Okay, now let's move to the secular. Let's look at faith in government. So a politician comes and reads out promises in a manifesto, and then 1 year later, 2 years later, 3, 4 years later, you have to hold that politician accountable. So how much faith do you think Nigerians have in this present government?
Well, this government has a target, and their target is to wipe away corruption. I tell people in this period of recession that we are not really in recession but deception, you know, because we together put ourselves into this trouble. How do I mean? We are very corrupt. Let's accept that fact. And then if you don't know why you have a problem and deal with it, you will not be able to move forward from there. And then the leader comes up and says he wants to, you know, settle corruption. Then from corruption, do some other things. And then maybe you begin to see recession, and then you begin to solve, and you are doubting, what, this man has a lot of promise. He said he's going to give us 1 meal for students and stuff like that. But you need to take a step, one step at a time. We need to understand that corruption needs to be dealt with, and the change begins from you. We have to change ourselves before we begin to point hand at somebody. Really, I must tell you this. If you must take a change in this nation, we must accuse the government. First, look at yourself and check your own surroundings. Have you changed your environment? Have you settled the problem around you? You can't just point out at anybody now, because the process is still ongoing. And we know for sure that with time, if we come together as one, because united we stand and divided fall, we are going to achieve this. We can't leave all that to the government to do.